What language should you run your podcast in? Well, that's a really quick one to answer. You should feel comfortable in the language as the host, even if it's not your native tongue, and now I'm stumbling over it. It doesn't matter. You don't have to speak the language perfectly. Actually, I think having an accent really makes you stand out and makes you more recognizable. So embrace that. But you should feel comfortable speaking that language when you're hosting the podcast in that language. Um, of course, and this has happened to one of my students, there might be the challenge that you want to reach an audience that speaks a different language, the one that you don't feel that comfortable in. How you can go about that is if you really want to reach that particular audience, then make sure to find a host or a co host who is comfortable speaking that language your audience speaks. And that has really inspired me to see how that has evolved for my student and how she has taken some decisions in her podcast and hosting to make that possible. And of course, there's also always the option that you broadcast in more than one language. What do I mean by this? I think it's very important that you have one lead language. Like, let's take my podcast, Hashtag Impact, for example. So the lead language is English, and every episode would kick off with speaking English, me speaking English, introducing the guests in English. But there have been occasions where I have introduced a whole episode to my audience in another language, German, my native tongue, because I had guests that I really wanted to feature on the show, but that were more comfortable speaking German. And knowing that I have an audience that not only speaks English, but some of them for sure also speak German, it was important to me to then broadcast that episode. And how I did that was that I would introduce all my podcast listeners in English to what was going to happen. Then I switched to German. I aired the whole episode in German, but I provided a translation and a summary for my English audience, mainly English-speaking audience, in the show notes where I would send them to and say, if you want to read what we have just discussed, you can do that over in my show notes. So this is something you can keep in mind as well, especially if you are finding yourself in a multicultural setting where you would like to cater to more languages and audiences that speak more than just one language. I hope this helps. Keep podcasting.